Hello, good morning, good evening, and welcome to the SFFRomCast. I am, as always, the lovely Jessica, and joined by my much better half, the lovely
Emma. Hello. We had that argument before. We're not going to go
did.
there.
Yeah, that was on the edited one, so we're going to leave it where it is for now.
Yeah.
But yeah, hey, we are here. Happy New Year to you all, with a little bit of an interstitial to kind of celebrate 2023 and give you something a little bit different. We at Christmas, I don't know if you listened to it, we jumped over to a different podcast called Two Lit Chicks, or A Lit Chick and Ed, as it has become recently.
Yeah.
And we did a little bit of adding to Santa's sack with books that we liked. So we've kind of invited some people over to come and have a look at some fantasy romance with us.
That's it. We're going to be chatting to them about some different things about their gateway romance books and giving them some recommendations. So, shall we get into it?
Yes, let's begin.
Let's go. Welcome. So, we have Julia and Ed with us for our New Year special. Would you like to introduce yourselves and say a little bit about your podcast and yourselves? So who would like to start?
I'll go first. So my name is Julia Boggio, and I am a writer and a podcaster at Two Lit Chicks. Two Lit Chicks is all about talking to writers about the books that changed their lives. So we've had Bonnie Garmis, Joanne Harris, Damian Barr coming up in our next episode. Loads of amazing writers, and of course you guys as well for our Christmas special. I am a member of the Romantic Novelists Association, as well as I know you guys are, and also a member of the Alliance of Independent Authors. And my first book, my debut novel, Shooters, is coming out in March. And Shooters is based on my many years as a wedding photographer. And I like to describe it as what Jilly Cooper did for show jumping with writers, I do for wedding photography with Shooters. So go out and pre-order that now.
Yeah, sold me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very good. I've read it. Well, the early draft is very good.
Oh, brilliant.
Super.
Yeah, we like that. We get to read each other's stuff early as well. It's nice. And Ed, how about you?
I'm Ed Crocker. I recently became co-host of Two Lit Chicks with the wonderful Julia, who's just introduced herself. And I'm also an author myself as well, very, very on trend there. I got an agent last year, and I'm currently on submission with my epic fantasy trilogy with vampires and werewolves in, called Lightfall.
And how mad is that driving you? Being on submission is long, painful process.
It's an insane process. I mean, anyone who doesn't know about publishing, basically all you need to know is a bunch of editors will slowly drip feed emails into your inbox telling you why they don't like your book. And then one day perhaps someone will say, let's have a meeting, I want to give you a book deal. Yeah, no, it's an insane process. I think writers complain about the querying process, which is where you try and get an agent, and that is an absolute nightmare. And then you're like, yes, I've got an agent, amazing. And then you go on submission and you're like, wow, give me back the querying process.
Yeah. And then you get the book accepted, and then it's more editing, and by the time it's published you hate that book.
Exactly. Yeah, you've been working on that book for like years, and you're like, I want it to die. What's going on? I want to do the next thing, which you then get to do in about 50 years. Sorry, that sounds quite negative, doesn't it? I'm very lucky,
but we love it. Yeah.
No, but it's true. I mean, I made the decision to self-publish because I did have an agent, and she did send it around to all the publishing houses. But and everybody was coming back, oh yeah, we love it, but we're not taking it. And it's like, oh, why aren't you taking it? And they said, and one of the reasons was, oh, we already have a wedding themed book on our list. And the other one, you'll love this one, was that in the rom-com market, they were looking for younger writers who had a better chance of going viral on TikTok.
Oh, that's horrible.
Yeah,
I don't like that.
And interesting, because TikTok is going through a lot right now, and there's a lot of conjecture about whether it's going to be as important in the book world coming up. We'll see.
Well, that's it. It's quite interesting, isn't it? I was hearing some stuff about that, because like now publishers have cottoned on, and they're basically going to be using it as their own marketing tool, which means that all of the same
it's flooding the market. Yeah.
Exactly.
The same pitfalls apply in terms of being an author and
Yeah.
having the budget, and whether or not the publisher chooses to give you the budget.
Yes, exactly. And
Or
I think that
you're
as soon as
promoting
TikTok
yourself.
loses its Wild West quality, I think that it's going to
Yeah.
just, people are just not going to be as
Yeah.
interested. So we'll see.
No.
We'll see what I could be wrong. I could be completely
That's it. We'll see it unfold.
I recently joined TikTok, and I mean, I'm sort of in this position where I have two views at the same time. On the one hand, I think it's like kind of unfair how writers these days have to just be on all social media. Like Harper Lee would never be able to be successful these days. You know, she just like sat in her own house and just never talked to anyone. You know, you just can't do that. But at the same time, I have recently started TikTok, and I am, even though I have like no followers, I'm really, really enjoying making stupid videos. It's the most creative fun I've had for years. So yeah, kind of in a Jekyll and Hyde. With,
well, that's the thing. I think as long as you keep it fun, as long as you're doing it. So I had to take a mental health break from it, you know, kind of halfway through December, and I haven't really gotten back on yet because, you know, you just start putting pressure on yourself that, oh, I got to keep posting a post. And then you belong to these TikTok groups for authors on Facebook, and they're like, you've got to do this and that. And I'm just like, oh my God, I have children to raise, you know? I got other stuff.
And I'm trying to teach not to be obsessed with social
all the
media
time.
and phones.
I have failed.
Well, this is it. My eldest is just on it. And if it's not 20 seconds of everything all encompassing, she's bored with it already, and she'll just skip, and then she can lose 7 hours of her day just flicking through 20-second clips. It's crazy.
Yeah, scary.
Well,
I'm like her. I'm like your child. Yeah.
I've
barely developed from your child.
One of the nice things about it that I found, though, particularly like, because I think we said we talk a little bit about like self-publishing, because you've chosen to go that way, haven't you, Julia? Is like how, although it's difficult having that pressure on authors, it has leveled the playing field a little bit for indie authors, because they've got vehicles to get out there now to find readers, which is nice, and which is really important for like the books we love, like fantasy and sci-fi romance, because it's only just sort of finding a foothold, particularly in the UK, where publishers are like, oh, we might actually get an audience for that. They haven't wanted to touch it for so long. So most of the books that we read are indie books. So
that's wonderful. That's really good to hear. I mean, I've got lots of facts and figures that I can't remember right now about indie publishing. But you know, when you look at like the star ratings between traditionally published and indie published books, there is literally very little difference, like negligible. And it's the one thing that does frustrate me is the snobbery around it. You know, like there was one lady with a podcast that said that she wouldn't have me on because I'm not traditionally published, and I mean that's fine if that's her thing, just don't tell me that.
Some people just don't care.
Exactly.
Just say like, I hate your face or something. Just don't, don't say that.
Exactly. I don't know, but there's a lot of snobbery out there. And finally, there was some data out of Germany as well, where romance is actually quite big in Germany. And I think the study asked whether they would ever read an independent novel, and people were like, no. And yet the data shows that they have, because there was like 60% or something. I don't know. I can't remember what it was, but the data showed that they had definitely been reading it, and they didn't realize they were reading independent.
This is it. They don't check.
You can't really tell. I mean, I wouldn't know. You can't tell from picking up a book and reading it,
not anymore,
whether or not. Definitely not so much anymore, when I think all the strain that's going on editors at the moment is clearly showing in traditional publishing, and that they're not quite getting the level of editing that they should. And it's like that used to be really the main thing people would throw at self-publishing, but I don't think you can tell at all. Even when you go off to look, people are because they're a business and they're running it as a business and being very professional and savvy. You can't tell whether or not it's a small imprint or it's just a self-published author that's, you know, putting
the work in.
Well, I've been reading past couple of years. I've really got into indie fantasy and horror, and honestly, some of the titles out now are just, I mean, they're so, because indie, like big indie fantasy authors now, like Ryan Cahill, etc. You know, they get the best editors, and they do a proper marketing campaign, and you know,
Yeah.
it's beautifully put together. So when, I mean, not always, you know, it's still very different levels, but with the very best fantasy indie authors, and you get these amazing packages, and there's not much difference anymore between trad pub and indie. The walls are falling down. So I mean, fancy fans, it's an amazing time. I think last year, or the year just gone, the first time I read slightly more indie than trad pub fantasy. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's loads of amazing trad pub titles, and I'm still, you know, I still loving that. But first time I read more indie than fantasy, and I was like, whoa! I did like, I'm a sad data geek. I'd worked it out at the end of the year, and I was like, whoa, mind blown! I've read more indies than trad pub first time.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought of it from like just pure fantasy or horror or something in other genres. Was just, you know, that because I read romance, it's all romance pretty much. The odd other one.
I can see somebody will have spreadsheets somewhere.
Yeah,
Ed, I'm looking at you from saying that.
I'm a spreadsheet guy. Yeah,
we can put them up in the video afterwards if you want to send them over. We'll have some spreadsheets and some data.
The thing I think is funny is sometimes, you know, I'll have a friend who reads it and reports, well, you know, now I'm sending out loads of arcs, and I like the note of surprise in their voice, like, oh, it's really good. Yeah, it's like,
thanks.
Is that because
that is the slap in the face for all romance readers, isn't it? It's good for a romance.
Yeah. No, thankfully they haven't said that. They just said it's really good. I mean, I've had men reading it as well, because I actually you know, I'll say this on here because I'd love any other romance novelist to get on board with this, but I want to start a hashtag Real Men Read Romance campaign.
Yes, nice.
And I've got lots of men reading it, and you know, they'll be putting that up around the time that I publish. But yeah, no, I think it's for everybody.
Oh, yeah, we can
Real man.
jump on the back of that.
Real man. I'm
Real
expecting
man.
your picture.
Yeah.
I'm expecting your picture, Ed.
Brilliant.
What is a real man?
It's a man who
Somebody
reads
who reads
romance.
Not me. No.
Reads romance, exactly.
So on that topic, let's jump into it. So last year we did a little bit about our gateways into fantasy romance. So Julia, obviously you are on the romance plane with us, so you have some books for us, and Ed, we're going to do you in a little bit with some recommendations that we've put together for your good self. So Julia, if you want to fire away with the first of the list that you have.
Okay, so I thought that, you know, the more I thought about it, the more I just kept thinking back and back and back in my timeline about books that, you know, were fantasy based, that had that romance element. And one of the earliest ones that I read was a series called Elfquest, which is actually behind me there. Yeah, and it was a small comic written out of Poughkeepsie, New York. You know, probably in the 70s. I think it probably started by a husband and wife team named Wendy and Richard Pinney. And it's about these elves who are thrown into a new world, and they're wolf riders. So they're not like elves like Christmas elves. They're elves like, I'm going to kill you with
your giant
they
sword.
can be both.
Yeah,
sometimes.
exactly. You know. So these are some, you know, badass elves, and so they're thrown into this new world, and they're trying to find others like them and whatnot. And the book. Yeah, I think I read this probably when I was about 9 years old or so. And the book wasn't so much about sex, but it was definitely sexuality in it. So even though in their values, they very much believed in the one, you know, finding that person who was, they also believed a lot in free love.
Why
which
choose?
was mind-bending for a girl who then went to Catholic school. Yeah. But yeah, I think that, you know, that was one of the first fantasy mixed with romance sort of books, because you know, there's a big romance between Cutter and Lita, who are the main characters. And yeah, I think that's probably was my first taste of the fantasy romance sort of well, it wasn't a genre then, so we can't really call it that, but just mixing those two together. So
you feel it was like you kind of got introduced more, I think people tend to call that like romantic fantasy, because it's fantasy is like the focus, but you have a solid romantic subplot that like unashamedly romantic subplot.
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, a lot of other fantasy can be like, no, we just don't want anything to do with lovey-dovey feelings, thank you, and it's like out there. So
Yeah.
Yeah. And did you kind of were you looking for more that had that romantic element to it?
No
or
doubt.
it was just,
No doubt.
yeah.
I was a Sweet Valley High reading. Yeah, I loved a bit of Sweet Valley High. So, so yeah, definitely. I was into romances, and I also, you can't see them because they're up there, but when you're little, you read a lot what's on your parents' bookshelf, and my mother had a lot of Victoria Holt, which is, you probably haven't heard of her. I mean, but she was a romance novelist, and I know it's a pen name for somebody, and I can't remember who, but anyway, so I was totally into those and reading them at a completely inappropriate age. I was an early reader and I knew things.
Yeah, I just had a library card and they let me take out whatever I wanted. It was like, it happened.
We've spoken to a lot of writers who had their librarians always fall into one of two camps, don't they? The completely like, oh, take what you want, and then no, that's not appropriate for you.
So what else did you find? What else is on your list?
I think, I mean, and again, this is still in that sort of comic realm, but I also read a lot of Marvel comics and DC and all that kind of stuff. And there were some major romances there. You had the triangle between Jean Grey and Wolverine and Scott, and they were excellent at building up that romantic tension, sexual tension. It's for kids though, so obviously there's not lots of sex, even though you've got these women with bodies that would feel those sexual
double
desires.
Standard there.
Exactly. So but I think
Rogue and Gambit. Sorry,
Rogue and Gambit. That's where I was going.
I was obsessed with Rogue and Gambit. Really obsessed with that relationship. Yeah.
My dog is called Remy for that very reason.
Really?
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's got to be done.
Definitely
called everyone Cherie, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
Cherie. I won't do my French accent, but yeah.
And he had perfect hair. He was fantastic.
Yeah. I wanted to be Gambit.
But isn't that, it's like I don't think they realized how many women or girls were reading comics at the time who really liked that kind of stuff, and they were just, I guess, making it palatable for their male audience or whatnot. But yeah, I loved those romances, and you really felt them. I mean, they were like you really thought about them and you wanted them together, so they were well done. The next book or next writer I would say is somebody named Tannith Lee, and have you ever read anything by her?
No, we were both looking it up, and I was looking at some of the covers for the books, and I was blown away that how beautiful they were. And she's British, isn't she? I didn't know any of this.
Well, funnily enough, I looked her up like really briefly, and she went to the secondary school where there was like 2 secondary schools that you could have gone to where I grew up, and she went to the other one that I went to, and I've never heard of her, but she must obviously have grown up where I grew up in London, because she went to Prendergast, which was like Ladywell, sort of Lewisham area where I grew up.
It's crazy. It's crazy that she's not better known, because she was amazing. And so she, the first book of hers that I read was called The Birth Grave, and it actually came out in 1975. I did not read it in 1975 because I was only 2 years old. But anyway, just 2 years later, no, I'm kidding. I probably read it. No, I probably read it, in my early teens. I don't know, somewhere around there. But she really did explore, feminism and sexuality in her books in a way that wasn't really being done, because of course most fantasy was being written by straight white men. So and I mean, I read her books a long time ago, so obviously I don't remember the specifics of it, but I really remember that the story, The Birth Grave, was about a very strong female character who had a body like sin, but cursed with a horrible face, so she had to wear a mask. And it's a Bildungsroman about a female goddess. And in the book, you see how men treat her, and some revere her and some try to knock her down. And it's, very much, she goes from situation to situation. While she has amnesia, so she doesn't quite remember who she was. And as she goes through, she realizes her own power. But it's a really, I think it's a great book, and it's actually a trilogy. And I think there was a reissue of it in 2015 with new covers. And in that, Marion Zimmer-Bradley did a foreword to it, and I've actually got it here because I think there's some interesting bits in it. Can I read it out?
Yeah, far away.
Okay. She says, there seems to be an unspoken assumption in science fiction that science fiction is usually read by men, or if it is read by women, it is read by those women who are bored with feminine concerns and wish to escape into the world of fantasy where they can change their internal viewpoint and gender and share the adventurous world of men. Here is a woman writer whose protagonist is a woman, yet from the very first she takes her destiny in her own hands, neither slave nor chattel. Her adventures are her own. She's not dragged into them by the men in her life, nor served up to the victor as a sexual reward after the battle. For the first time since C.L. Moore's Warrior Woman, Jirel of Dowry, don't know if I said that right, we see the woman adventure in her own right. But this book is not an enormous allegory of women's liberation, nor an elaborate piece of special pleading. It's just a big, delightful feast of excitement and adventure. And I liked that. And,
That's fantastic.
If I can, encourage more people to go out and read Tannith Lee, I think that, go see if you can find it, because she was good. And the romance and the sex that she wrote, there was a lot of sex in her books, but none of it was fetishized or anything. It was very much more matter of fact than, modern day fantasy romance. But that definitely was one of the early books where, there was this sexuality and in a fantasy novel that that really attracted me to it. And I think, going on from that, Marion Zimmer-Bradley as well, she wrote Mists of Avalon, which was another firm favorite of mine as a child.
I've been recommended that quite a few times, actually. I don't know why I still haven't got to it, but
yeah, I can answer that, Emma. Your TBR is huge.
All right, you know.
that could be the problem. It's the Arthurian legend from the women's point of view. And I think it was the first time I realized that you could do that. Like, you could flip an old story on its head and tell it completely. And so I was really attracted to that. And of course, there's a sexual relationship between Arthur and his sister, Morgane.
Hello. What?
Taboo is up there as well.
Cersei Lannister.
Before there was Cersei.
He wasn't the first, was he? To go
exactly. But they're tricked into it. It's all during this pagan festival, but it's very passionate, and there's a connection that forms. They don't realize who they're having sex with at the time, but and then of course that has to happen so that she can give birth to Mordred, who ends up being the downfall of Arthur down the line. But so
Mordred, sorry, the product of incest. I didn't know this.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Where have you been, Ed?
I know. I need to get into my Arthurian stuff more. Okay.
Yeah, it's a really good book.
So many retellings of it. To be fair, that some bits will get left by the wayside and some pull through, don't they? It depends what you've read.
She was one of the first, I think, Arthurian retellings. And she went on to write some other books sort of in that world that I don't think were as successful. To me, Mists of Avalon really is it's a classic. It's a standout classic. So that's another one for your TBR there, Ed, as well.
I'll add on. It's about 200 on it at the moment, but
never ending.
I know. Now, you've probably read Laini Taylor.
I have,
That's an Emma,
we talked about her on the last season because we did an episode on Cool Magic, and I did Daughter of Smoke and Bone because she's brilliant. She's such a
I would read
writer.
Anything that she writes.
I've not done the Strange the Dreamer ones. Have you read those? Are they really good?
I mean, the way she writes is just magical. I do have an example here. I feel like I'm just going to keep reading things out during this episode. Just a quote that I absolutely love. And again, in this book, the sex isn't explicit, but the romance is. And it's so well done, the romance between Carew and Akiva. And you feel it again, you feel it in your bones. It was a great book. But here's a funny little excerpt from that book. I don't know many rules to live by, he'd said, but here's one. It's simple. Don't put anything unnecessary into yourself. No poisons or chemicals, no fumes or smoke or alcohol, no sharp objects, no inessential needles, drug or tattoo, and No inessential penises either. Inessential penises, Carew had repeated, delighted with the phrase in spite of her grief. Is there such a thing as an essential one? When an essential one comes along, you'll know, he replied.
That's it. It's up to you to decide what's essential and what isn't.
Exactly. And I just love that. I mean, so many great messages. I mean, it's a YA book as well, isn't it? Great messages in there, you know, don't defile your body with bad stuff, but also no inessential penises.
Yeah, get yourself a penis scale, kids.
Yeah.
A great name for a series, isn't it? Essential penises.
Really?
Yeah. There you go. We'll leave that to you to write that one.
There we go.
And finally on my list, can I do one more, or have I gone on too long?
Nah, it's fine.
Okay. And I think this was really my gateway into discovering things like ACOTAR, was Jacqueline Carey's Kushiel's Dart. So that was the first time I think I read good sex in a fantasy novel, and because I'd been reading mostly, you know, straight white men. So like Robert Jordan, who can't who doesn't have sex well at all. In fact, I think it's hilarious that Robert Jordan did a pull quote for Kushiel's Dart, and it reads, "A very sophisticated fantasy, intricately plotted, and a fascinating read."
I've not read any Robert Jordan's. Is it terrible? Because I watched the Wheel of Time season.
No. I mean, behind my computer is actually propped up on 2 Robert Jordans right now.
Oh no, I mean, I just mean sex. Series. Not that.
His sex.
I enjoyed Wheel of Time. Yeah, it's like I haven't read it, so I don't know how.
Romance is so central to his plot. You know, between Rand and his harem of 3. But you know, the sex is very glossed over, and you know, just not well.
Yeah.
So so we did chat about this, that is he one of these boobly people, or is it just very much glossed over? Because you see occasionally on Twitter and TikTok, people put these little excerpts from what people have written about how her breasts followed him around the room. Is it kind of that level, or?
I can't remember. Do you
Have you seen any of that?
I don't think I mean, it's been a while since I've read them, but from my memory, it's not quite as bad as, you know, the personification of the boobs. Like the Silence of the Lambs, isn't it? Personification of the boobs. But it's like not great. It's kind of like just sort of a little bit like, oh, kind of, you just want to sort of wash yourself a little bit afterwards.
It should have been fade to black, basically.
Yes,
if you're not comfortable, just fade it to black and leave it.
I mean, female characters are huge in his books. I mean, absolutely, you know, pivotal to the entire story. But you know, here's a man who, and I think we said this in the episode where we interviewed Stacey McEwen. Here's a man who went to the Citadel, which is was an all-male school. He was very into military history. He drank whiskey. He went fishing. I mean, I'm not sure how many women he really knew, but, you know, so he wrote what he knew. But that being said, I do love Wheel of Time. So he did something right.
Yeah, that's it. But yeah, you can, I mean, I think that's it, isn't it? Sometimes authors can be kind of like, oh, they did this thing terrible, so don't read it. But there can be good stuff in and around that. Just because there's a weak point doesn't mean that there's not also a lot of amazing
there's loads of strengths. I mean, he was like a puppet master with all those strings and whatnot. He really did a great job. But going back to Kushiel's Dart,
we digress.
But yeah, I do like the image of him reading those books. I think that's quite entertaining to me.
Well, I just started it when you mentioned that was going to be one on your list. I had it already on my Kindle because I'd grabbed it in a deal and it had sat there. And I was like, oh, all right, I'll pick it up and start having a look. And I've got really sucked into it. The world building is amazing in it. You know,
it's very, very good. And I mean, if Phaedra were like a Marvel superhero, I think that her name would be Sex Girl or something like that.
Sex Girl.
Seriously, because basically in the book, her superpower is she's sexy and she likes the sex and she can take it. You know, I mean, this is her superpower, and she manipulates politics through this, and she saves herself, and you know, all kinds of stuff. And it turned out to be a very handy skill to have.
She's owning it.
So she's owning it.
I had to kind of I had to get through the beginning though, because it you got to like buy into the world and the culture and stuff in order to
Yes.
be okay with the kind of the
What happens?
grooming-ish element.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of those,
just like a trigger warning there for people who are going to look for them.
Yeah, there's a lot of BDSM, definitely.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's basically like a sexy fantasy France.
It gave me really, really strong like Robin Hobb vibes though as well, like Assassin's Apprentice. Like it's that same kind of you're so much in her head and this big world that she's coming into and learning about herself and her power, as it were, and stuff, and like you say, you know, manipulating things and having this mentor as well, which is you know, that she wants to get to the bottom of. Yeah, definitely like that. And Anne Rice, I don't know why it's reminding me of Anne Rice. I think maybe the richness of it, like the prose and stuff, and just how much Anne Rice used to get into like the detail of historical stuff, and yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've read all, what is it, 6, 9 books in the series? I can't remember. There's a lot. Well, there's the first series. It's 9. It's 9. Yeah.
Good series.
There's the first 3, and then there's a second 3, I think, about her, and then there's 3 following another character, I think.
Yeah.
Don't quote me. And then I think there's a new book that's just come out from Jacqueline's point of view.
Okay.
So, but anyway, yeah, I recommend it. I think that I enjoy it because I think that, you know, even though there's a lot of sex in it, I think it's actually secondary to the world building and to the thought that goes into it. And I think it's well written, and the characterization's great, and all the things you want in a good book, as you're finding out. So
yeah.
Yeah, it's nice having that kind of there's that side to the society where it's just like it's very open in terms of who's loving who, and
sorry,
you know,
somebody's just at my door. I'm really sorry.
Okay.
Do you mind if I'll just pop up? I'll be back in 2 seconds. Sorry.
Go for it.
Like that BBC News bit where, do you remember when the reporters saw
and
then
yeah, we always have to like chase our cats out, don't we?
This is it. I did an extraction of cat, dog, just all out.
I have no pets or children, just a toy parrot. So
yeah, just unboxes.
Oh, is it the one that talks back to you? I had that one when I was a kid.
No, it's literally like a cloth parrot that my mum made for me. Quite recently, actually.
Oh, bless.
I want to see it. Go get it.
I can get it for you.
Gotta get the parrot.
Sorry.
That's okay. We were just talking about Ed's parrot.
A cloth parrot,
yeah.
My cloth parrot, yeah. It's good. Good lad. Solid lad. Yeah.
Well, at that natural break, shall we move on to Ed and recommendations for him? And have you read any of the books that Julia was talking about, other than Wheel of Time? And
just the Wheel of Time, basically.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? Kushiel's Dart is probably one of the most recommended books that people recommend to me to get into romance. I've got a friend who every time I see him just says, "Have you read that yet?" And I still haven't. It's on my TBR, but that I get recommended that quite a lot.
I can see why. Yeah, definitely. Oh, again, I think it's like is there a really strong romance that comes about in it, Julia, or is it like there's like a central romance? Because I'm like maybe 35-40% through, and probably Jocelyn has only just sort of turned up, and he's the first one that I kind of thought, oh, is this going to be the romance kind of thing?
I don't want to ruin things for you, but
no, don't. No. Although there's also Hyacinth, who I thought, oh, maybe could be him, love triangle, maybe, don't know. But it'd be nice if they're just friends, because that's good. But sorry, getting into it.
Getting back again. We're digressing all the time. So Ed, you did give us a list of authors that you read, and they were kind of more Emma's sort of area. So she's got some recommendations for you, and I go a little bit darker. So I've got some little wild cards for you as well. So Emma, if you want to throw yours out, I hope you have a pen or your laptop handy.
I'm excited.
It's fine. Or you can watch it back.
I'll just watch it back later.
Yeah. It's not, I haven't got loads because I know what TBRs are like. But you said to us, like, you tell us which ones you kind of went for when you.
Okay, it's a good
Yeah.
test of my short-term
your
Yeah.
memory.
You're going to come out with all different ones, and my recommendations.
I have it
won't
written on a
work at all.
post-it, so
Excellent. Okay, well, I know I would have said Terry Pratchett because
Mhm.
Terry Pratchett is like
My
my.
little corner here. Terry
Oh, is that
Pratchett.
Terry
Probably
Pratchett
can't see.
corner?
That's
Amazing.
my Terry
I
Pratchett
can't really
corner.
see. Okay.
Oh, it's gone dark now.
Yeah. Well, if
There you
I was sensible and actually did zooms in front of my bookcases, which I really need to do instead of this crazy weird
Look here,
picture.
Terry Pratchett.
You've all got
There you go. See, Julia has it sorted. I don't know why I pointed down. I might not be above Julia on the thing. I'm
The
just
next to
pointing.
her on my screen.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, but if I'd had that sorted, you'd see that I have all the Discworld books. And Terry Pratchett is my sort of like original god. He's the reason, well, apart from Elderlings, he's the reason as a younger person why I'm into fantasy. Well, I mean, he's one of the reasons I'm writing my current epic fantasy trilogy, which isn't as like overtly comic as Discworld. But that idea of like a sort of an urban sprawl where you've got all kind of different creatures in, and it's like an analogy for current political issues. You know, you got your trolls and your and your dwarves and your golems and vampires and werewolves, which is kind of, well, there's a Terry Pratchett book called the Fifth Elephant, which has like werewolves doing political stuff and vampires. And that's where I got the idea for my fantasy trilogy, which is like vampires and werewolves doing political stuff. I'm not an original person at all. So yeah, Terry Pratchett is, I mean, I won't do my rant about how Terry Pratchett is like actually a literary god and not just a comic fantasy guy, because that's not the place. But he is, I think, one of the best writers of the 20th century. And he needs to be recognised as such.
You'd be preaching to the choir, I think.
Excellent. I won't do it then. I'll spare you that. I'll spare you that. Okay, great. So yeah, Terry Pratchett. And the other ones were, I'll be brief on the other ones. The other ones were Mark Lawrence, I think, who's a kind of grimdark. Well, not always books of grimdark actually, but he's very famous for a trilogy called The Broken Empire. And Prince of Thorns, the first one, basically introduced a very dark sort of villain anti-hero character. Well, so dark he's not even an anti-hero. He's just a can I swear?
Yeah, of course you can.
Yeah,
he's a bastard, basically.
No,
He's a bastard, and he does some very bad things. But, well, in my opinion, he sort of redeems himself a little bit morally in later books. But anyway, grimdark, I'm all about grimdark. And then there was Robin Hobb, who I think you've already briefly talked about. Anyone who's read Robin Hobb will understand when I say that Robin Hobb is just a phenomenal writer. Really, her ability to do characterization is, I'm not sure I've ever come across a writer inside or outside fantasy who can do that. That just that moment where the character, in a realistic way, just reveals themselves. So yeah, Robin Hobb wrote The Realm of the Elderlings, that sort of 16-book series, which took me like 3 years to get through. That's just absolutely phenomenal. And I think there was another one. Did I say Naomi Novik?
You did. Well done.
I was going to say, please say that one, because I'm going to paste one of my
I think that was a fine
that.
one. And Naomi Novik, I mean, no introduction to a lot of people, but she's just I might say she's the best current fantasy writer. The reason I say that is because she has just completed the Scholomance trilogy. And anyone who's watching this, stop watching. Well, no, carry on watching this. But then after you've watched it,
just mute you quickly there before you say that.
Mute this moron and go read the Scholomance trilogy, which I think is already one of the greatest fantasy trilogies ever written. What Naomi Novik does in terms of world building and characterization and just going dark, but also going emotional, is just out of this world. I don't think anyone's doing what she's doing right at this moment. That's how much I think that's amazing. So
She's brilliant. Definitely.
So I got quite intense. So I get very intense when I talk about my favorite fantasy.
I'm pleased that we asked you to do that and introduce it, because that's, this is not just an opportunity for us to recommend books to you. It's for listeners to find other. People don't just read fantasy romance or just read fantasy. You cross all over, don't you, and enjoy everything.
Exactly.
So one of the first ones that I went for, because of your love for Terry Pratchett, was there's a duology by Jessica Thorne, which is Mageborn and Nightborn. I read them a few years ago, so my memory is hazy on plot points, and I don't want to spoil things because there's kind of I know there's a big plot twist in the first one that I didn't necessarily see coming, but it's got a very heavy Terry Pratchett vibe. So the main character Grace is like, I think she's a captain in like a city guard. So you get a very, I remember reading it and being very like, oh, this has got such vibes of the Night's Watch, sort of, you know, from
That's one of my favorites.
yeah,
Yeah,
I thought like, yeah, definitely. So there's magic in the world, but it's kind of controlled, I believe. You have to be like registered, and the hero in it, which is strangely, I think he's the Lord of Thorns. You were talking about Prince of Thorns. You always end up with these themes, don't you, in names and stuff like that.
Excellent, very well done.
Yeah, he's like part of the royal family, but he I think he deals with like he kind of controls the mages that have got out of control. So I think he has like the ultimate powers to like remove their magic and things like that, and people end up going to the palace and going down to the dungeons and no one knows what's happened, but she, through twists of plot, ends up being his bodyguard and then finding out more about what goes on, and there's political shenanigans, and it's fun, but it's a good one, I think, to read if you're coming at it enjoying Terry Pratchett for that kind of lighter feel, but also the balance of the romance thread with the plot thread as well. I think it's quite good for that.
Okay, I like the sound of that sort of bodyguard thing. So there's a bit, is he like a little bit reluctant because she's just like constantly saving him and he's kind of being like an alpha male, like, oh, I find that a bit uncomfortable, and then he realizes, oh, actually you're just awesome, and then
I don't recall that.
Have I just written a plot to a new awesome
You've got a new book there.
Yeah.
24 release.
I mean,
the bodyguard, that's not been done, has it?
Yeah.
Bodyguard.
Well, that's it. I think that's the interesting thing. If you're not used to, if you read more of one type of genre than another, then you're more used to certain tropes and you expect those. Whereas like knowing kind of more romance tropes, I think it's, I don't know, a bit of a lesser thing that you would expect the hero to act like that, I guess. Would you agree? Possibly.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that's
but I can't recall, is the honest truth.
You need to read it now.
It's terrible. I remember some things. It's amazing how much you do remember from all the books you read, really, when you think about it. All of the information that has been shoved away in the brain.
Well, that's why I don't remember major events of my life. All I remember is major plot threads of books I've read. Like, I can't. What was I doing 7 years ago? I don't know. You know, I can tell you exactly what's happening in Robin Hobb's 16 books.
Yes, that's it. And then the other ones that I was going to recommend to you, based on Naomi Novik kind of vibes, is I talked about The Wolf and the Woodsman on the last season of the podcast too, which is by Ava Reid. And that's based on, like, it's a retelling, as you could probably guess, of Red Riding Hood, but it's very, very loose. Like it's barely there. You've got like the woodsman and the wolf, but the wolf is like there's a sacrifice basically from the village, so it's got quite uprooted vibes. You would think it's quite similar to Uprooted, but it takes it in quite a different direction, and it's quite dark as well. It's got she doesn't shy away from sort of horror elements and stuff, and it goes quite deep into like the importance of storytelling and oral history, and it was fantastic. I think it was probably one of my favorite books from, was it last year that I read it? I think I read it at the beginning of the year. And she's just done also, I say she, I think it's they actually, I apologize, I think Ava Reid is they, that is Juniper and Fawn, which is another retelling, and that's even more down the sort of gothic horror route. But I've only just got it and I started to read it, and I'm not even sure whether that ends with like a happily ever after, but there is definitely a romantic plot thread in it. And yeah, it looks really cool. People have loved that even more than Wolf and the Woodsman, the ones that have loved it. Okay. So there's two very juicy ones there.
Awesome. I've seen Wolf and the Woodsman recommended in a lot of sort of like lists, actually.
It's great. They've got a beautiful way of writing, and but the world building is phenomenal too, and the characters are like you were saying a bit with Robin Hobb, you know, you've got like moments where they make decisions and it's very realistic, like honest about what people will do, not necessarily so much stereotyped, you know. You can recognize all of the shades of grey within people, within her characters, which I think is interesting. Yeah.
Oh, that sounds brilliant.
Ooh.
Cool.
There we go. So Jess, what did you go for?
Mine's not going to be anywhere as deep and meaningful as Emma's, because that's just how we roll.
It's got to be like the full gamut, hasn't it?
You can't have too much deep and meaningful. You've got to have a balance. Yeah.
Okay, so
give me the shallow.
Yeah. That's what I'm here for. So you mentioned about werewolves in politics and stuff, and one has just cropped into my head that wasn't on my list, so I'm going to add this in now because I can. This is an author called C.M. Nascosta, and she went huge about in the last year for a book called Morning Glory Milking Farm, which is about Minotaur milking. I'll leave it at that and not go into more detail.
No.
Now you've done it.
I require
a little bit more.
More detail, please.
There are puddles and they are not very shallow. I'll give you that. So she has a series set in Cambric Creek is the place, and there are loads of books, and it's orcs and it's werewolves and it's minotaurs and it's fae, all living together in this place, and they are all the politics and the life that revolves around these people within this place, and how the humans interact with them and how they interact with each other. And it's just, she's a fantastic author, and the series is brilliant. There's about 4 or 5 different ones. She's done A Girls' Weekend, which is I think going to be a trilogy. The 3rd one's not out yet, which is really orc based, and these fae women, I think, who are kind of trying to come into this new world and leave their fae origins behind, because if you know faes within fantasy, they are kind of very snooty and very up themselves and trying to pull other people into that. That's not going to happen. So C.M. Nascosta, fantastic. Go through all of her books. The one that we kind of spoke about was a little bit more horror-y, and it's Her Soul to Take by Harley LaRue. So Emma and myself have both read this one, and it's a lot more dark. Again, I'm trying to pull up the information, and I read like the 2 or 3 books in the series very quickly, so I'm trying to not encroach on lots of them. But I think there's a demon involved in this, and I can't remember all the bits and pieces. Emma, can you give me a can you not either?
So she has to move back to the town, and I think has there been a murder or something like that?
Yes, something has gone on, and it's not really easy to see. You can see it's not normal.
And she's a ghost hunter, like she does does she do like a YouTube channel or something like that? So she seeks out these like spooky places and wants to look into it, and it's clear there's like some strange cult type stuff going on, and but there is actually a demon around. It
sounds amazing. Is there any actual romance in it, or just like awesome?
Oh yes. There's a demon involved. There has to be romance.
That's where we click straight away. You've mentioned the demon. Oh, that's the romance.
That's your main character there. But there is one more, which is an acquired taste. It's called A Lady of Rooksgrave Manor by Catherine Moon, which is a Why Choose book. So I don't know if you're familiar with the phrase.
So what? Why choose? No, I'm not. Please tell me more. Is it like Minotaur milking, or
there isn't in that one, I don't think. But no, so you have your character, male or female, and why choose? She has an option of several partners, and she just invites them all along.
Like why choose? Oh yes, I was thinking in my head like the letter Y, and it's like some kind of Y chromosome. Like why choose? Choose your. Do you want to be a man or a woman? It's like okay.
So this is the thing with the trope. So in fantasy romance, that is just a general trope. You know, why choose? Have everybody. So
it's quite new, isn't it? Sort of.
Yes.
Last few years, that's got more of a thing alongside kind of monster romance.
Yes,
well.
which has come up in the last few years. But yeah, this one has a lot of your horror characters that she has to pick from. So there's like a Jekyll and Hyde kind of character in there. And yeah, so she goes with both sides of the Jekyll and the Hyde, which is quite interesting. And again, there's demons and orcs and monsters. And yeah, it's a fun little romp.
Sorry,
Well, yeah, because Rookesbury Manor is like a kind of like a brothel in as much, but
Yes.
for monsters who can't find anywhere to go because they're not accepted. So yeah, it kind of, actually, you talking about it made me think a bit of Kushiel's Dart in that she has a calling for that.
Yes, she's very good at
she's
accepting
in
monsters.
touch with her sexuality and knows what she likes. So
can I just pick you up? You said she goes with both sides, the Jekyll and Hyde.
Yeah.
My memory of Jekyll and Hyde. So Hyde is Jekyll is Hyde. Yeah, Hyde. It's just basically like a sort of horrific, like 10-foot tall serial killer who has no good in him because he's literally a personification of evil. So what's that dating scene like?
I'd say he's more, if we're going back to the Marvel universe, I'd say he's more Hulk than full Hyde.
Okay, so he's like just very angry, but then when you get him in a restaurant, he's sort of like Hulk slash just drinking wine.
Yeah, basically. I don't think a restaurant is the place that they would meet, but yes, he's very much Hulk slash.
It's very much
Nice.
Hyde would just basically like just kill her and then just like spit on a corpse.
Yeah, I was going to say just shake his hands and off he goes. No,
Yeah.
he's a little bit nicer than that, but he does have the darker side of the two.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I pick up on very annoying things, I realise.
No, that's fine. I was going to say, you made us stop and think there. It's like, what? Which one?
Well, that's the whole thing about like monster romance that's interesting, like we were saying before, about when you read, particularly in like horror, you expect certain things, but monster romance is very much about like who are the real monsters, and it tends to be the people, the humans, like, and the monsters have, the hidden depths and things, and a lot of people really enjoy it for that, like that. Accepting difference is a big theme within that, I think, definitely.
Also tentacles.
Yeah, let's not forget.
like hentai, or what are we talking about?
No, literal tentacles.
Literal.
You know what, the possibilities are endless.
Indeed.
Anyway.
Forget Minotaur milking, tentacles is where it's at. Yeah.
Have you read anything like that, Julia? Have you gone down that
that
wormhole?
Yeah.
I have not gone down that wormhole, but I will give it a go. Yeah.
Don't say wormhole next to tentacles.
It could turn up. You never know.
Thinking that.
I did actually read. So you recommended A Marvelous Light when you came on, and I read it. I mean, I thought it was good. It took me a long time to get into it, though.
Oh, really? Yeah.
And I don't know. Was it the world building or what? I just found it was a little bit of a slow takeoff. Once I got to the end, I was into it, and I would read the other ones in it. But it was a little bit slow. Maybe just building the world, and because you're sitting on Robin's shoulder, aren't you? Watching for the most part. He's going, what is going on here?
And trying to get your head into something you don't understand, and he doesn't understand it either. So it's kind of like, what's this with this?
So you're going at his pace.
Basically.
Yeah. And you're like, I could have gotten this on page 1, okay?
Do you tend to read more that's fantasy, like a full-on fantasy world, like a second world, or so you were expecting it more to be like thrown at you rather than it's just wandering around Edwardian London doing admin.
Exactly. It's like he's a secretary basically. But I think just getting my head around what's the difference between the worlds and whatnot. When I'm used to full on, this is completely different.
Cool. No, that's fair comment, isn't it? Everyone comes to these things like you get different signposts. I think when you're used to reading different things, like you'll pick up on, that's going to be important if you're used to reading something that's more contemporary.
Yes, exactly. I think maybe if you're a more experienced fantasy reader, you'll find a book like that slower, where it's just kind of taking a long time to build. So, but I still ultimately I enjoyed it. So.
Can I just ask you two, because you made me start thinking, Emma, about monster romances. Have you guys read A Dowry of Blood?
I saw you recommend that on
No.
your. I've seen a lot of people talk about that, and I really do want to read that one. It looks great.
Oh, one of my best books I read last year. So it's basically it's a Dracula retelling from the point of view of the brides. So it's essentially an analogy for an abusive relationship, and it is. I mean, that sounds like, oh, is that a bit dodgy? You know, is that done properly? It is phenomenal. Like, it is literally, because Dracula is basically the abuser in terms of control, and it's this idea that he controls his brides over the centuries by being incredibly charismatic, and then they start to realize about 600 years down the line that he's not a charismatic guy. He's actually like a controlling, abusive character. And then they start to kind of plot their escape from him, essentially. And it is, oh my word, it's written beautifully. It's written amazingly. It's compelling plot. You know, it's not just a focus on that analogy. It's also this idea of immortality and like, what's that like to be with someone for so many hundreds of years? Because Dracula's like, we don't need to go do that. We can just stay in and just, we can be together. And they're like, well, we want our own lives because we're like 1,000 years old now.
God.
It's honestly, it's, I mean, obviously, trigger warning for anyone who has been in any of that kind of situation, because it is very, it goes into detail about that kind of situation. But oh my word, it's a masterpiece. It's incredible. Yeah,
brilliant. Yeah,
we have been on about a new vampire book recently, haven't we? We're looking for.
Yeah.
I just have to plug my computer and just. Sorry, I just keep. 1 second.
I'll get my parrot.
Yeah, that's it.
I've got a stick here. Let's have a look. Let's go have a go.
No, but it's great. Yeah, it's wow. Because I was quick random boring story. I was a juror at the the horror section of the British Fantasy Awards last year.
Oh, cool.
And the eventual winner was Last House on Lever Street by Catriona Ward, which is, I mean, that's a masterpiece. Like, if you've ever read Catriona Ward in horror.
Yeah, I haven't. I don't tend to do horror.
Yeah,
she's a name I've heard of at least.
That's another episode where I recommend horror. But yeah, she's like the best horror writer in the world at the moment. But so that's a masterpiece. But my choice for number one, which I think came third in the rankings, was A Dowry of Blood.
Oh, right.
So that's how much. Yeah, that's how much I love it.
Yeah.
Done.
Okay. Well, I think if that tends to be our moment, Julia, when you have to go off and do something, we're like, we're ready.
I know. I'm sorry. I thought it would last longer, but anyway.
Yeah.
But I did actually want to say, for if anybody does want to try Elfquest out, they've actually done a podcast retelling of the first book, and I have to say the soundscape is absolutely amazing. You can find it on Apple, any of the podcast providers, and one of the voices is done by Tara from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Yep.
Takes us all back.
Yeah.
Tara.
Yeah,
sadly missed.
I'll try and find the link for that for the show notes.
We'll add it to notes. Yes.
Yeah, that's it. It's going to be a long one. This episode
really is.
We've talked about a lot of books, so I hope people are ready for this.
Yeah, that's it. And speaking of, actually thinking of that was a good way to move into our kind of wrap up bit, in that we'll be giving everybody this New Year podcast with all these books to read. Have you got any reading goals for the year? Anything you'd like to try and do? Do you set yourself a goal, or do you just sort of read what you like when you like?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I see all these bookstagrammers, because obviously I'm stalking them all right now because I've got a book coming out. Saying, "Oh, I'm going to read 100 books this year," and how many? They're all saying at the end of the year how many. And I just read, I just read when I have time, mostly for the podcast, because, for every podcast now we read at least 4 books. So it's a lot of reading, and I get really excited when I can actually choose the book I want to read.
Yeah.
We've found that too. Absolutely.
Your palette cleanser.
We're picking books that we enjoy to tell people about. It still kind of starts to feel like work, and you just want to read whatever you want to read after a while, don't you?
But that being said, over Christmas I picked up 2 separate rom-coms, and I couldn't get into them. So I don't want to say what their names are. One was a wedding related one, but I feel like I think sometimes with reading wedding ones, because I used to be in the industry, I feel like it's like a doctor watching Grey's Anatomy. You're just like, it's not how it would happen. Yeah. So there's that. But the other one, I skim read it, and I have never done that before. And it's one that's gone huge on TikTok, and I'm just like, I don't understand.
Yeah, I think the hype kills things sometimes too much. You get too much of an idea about what it's going to be before you've even started it, and then you start and there's nothing like what you imagined.
It was nothing special, and it needed a good editor. Let's put it that way, you know. And I'm just like, and not as good as my book, obviously.
Which is coming out soon. We should point that out again.
Yes, March 6th. March
6th. There we go. Oh, but quite soon. Yeah. Oh, you're going to be busy.
I'm in marketing hell right now. So, and I've actually written an article on my website all about marketing tips for debut writers who are in the pre-order phase, because I couldn't find much information for that. So because I have a background in marketing and I was in advertising for a long time, and then ran my own business for 15 years, it's something I know a little bit about. So
a few ideas.
And yet you still find it hellish.
It is, because it's all consuming. That's why. It's like you go to sleep thinking about it, you wake up thinking about it, and you're boring your friends. Like it's like, you just should come with a warning that says, do not ask me about my book.
It's kind of like, because the possibilities are endless for what you can do. There's never like a cutoff. It's not a job that you like, tick box, I've done that, because you can always do something more, and
you never know which is going to be the bit that yields the dividends as well. So that's why you just have to spread your tentacles out. It's a theme as far as they'll go, so that you can just cover as many bases as you can. But it's not easy.
What about you, Ed? Do you have a goal? Do you try and like say to yourself, I'd like to try this year, or this year?
Well, so what I tend to do is I tend to read a lot of fantasy, and I sometimes neglect my other two favorite genres, which are horror and like crime, particularly murder mystery. So I want to make sure I read slightly more horror this year and slightly more murder mystery. Another thing, so I've started getting, I've luckily started receiving,
and romance. You forgot to say romance.
Romance. No, that was
obviously
that was included in the fantasy. Obviously, continue reading fantasy and then read. Well, this is the problem, because like I'm someone who, I want to make it very clear that it doesn't matter how many books you read a year. It's about whether you're having fun. Okay. Before I say this next bit, I need to make that clear. But I'm one of those awful people who like challenges themselves with books. So like I like to read, I try and read 3 or 4 books a week. And then at the end of the year, I work out my total, and then I try and beat it the next year. I know it sounds awful, but like
I had a hunch when you talked about your spreadsheet.
There was
But it's the only way I can do it, because like I'm reading tons of books, like Julia said, for the Two Licks podcast, which is great because that gives me a chance to read like other genres and literature, which I like, but I don't often get a chance to read. But then I've got all these ARCs, author review copies, that come in my way now, because I've got a podcast, which is amazing, because I used to just be like a sad geek that you could never get this stuff, and now I'm being able to get these advanced fancy copies. So I've got that, but then I've got all the books I want to read for fun, and the only way to do all this is to become one of those awful like must read 3 or 4 books a week people. My challenge is basically
audiobooks, because that sounds like a lot of books to read.
So you know what, like I don't want to insult everyone who loves, because I know everyone loves audiobooks, and like it is an awesome format. It's not a great format for me. Because I read, God, I'm sounding like the worst person ever here. Like I read quite quickly. So like sometimes I get into like a zone where I'm just like, if I'm enjoying a book, I'm just like, and like if someone's voice is too slow for me. And also
that's why you speed it up, Ed. I listen to all my 1.4.
I don't know how people can listen to it all sped up. I would just
I
can't do it.
No, not that sped up. Just like a little bit. So they're just talking a little bit faster.
I'm very similar, Ed. I find audiobooks too slow for me. Like it will take me like months to read a book I probably would have read in a week, because it's finding the times to
Yeah.
sit and listen to it as well. Like,
Well, this is the thing, you don't sit and listen. I listen to it on the school run, you know, or just when I'm
yeah,
loading the dishwasher, cooking a meal, like
Yeah.
same places I listen to podcasts.
I think it's
Yeah.
a lifestyle thing. So like people who have normal lives, like Julia, who have exciting normal lives with families and
Exciting
school
normal
runs. Like then there's people like me who just kind of like sit in their flat and play video games and then just have like 6 hours a day where they just sit down and read. And like so audiobooks are not really for like, they're amazing.
sounds great.
Yeah, it really does.
I know, we're all like,
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
It's not always cracked up to me.
the grass is always greener on the other side of the street.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
You do audiobooks, don't you, Jess? You listen to them sometimes.
yes, yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Again, there is that problem that doing it on the school run, if the phone suddenly doesn't connect to the earphones, then the entire playground has a very in-depth knowledge of what I'm listening to.
Minotaur milking.
Yeah, or in the car when I'm driving
Yeah.
and the kids are listening. But no, I do get into an audiobook, but again, it has to be the right voice and it has to be the right speed, because if I've got this, I was going to say agenda, but no, if I get just this really slow voice, I just cannot get into it, and it just
Yeah.
and then I won't actually read the book afterwards because it just got me to a point where I just couldn't.
I can't do fiction. I have done non-fiction, because non-fiction is the kind of thing, if I try to read it normally, I'll start nodding off or something. Not because it's not interesting, just my brain won't engage necessarily at the times that I read, which tends to be later in the day. So audiobooks are good for me for that, I think. And they tend to be, non-fiction also tends to be read by the author, I think, which kind of helps. Whereas I can't do fiction at all. I find fiction really hard.
well, so I used to have the exact same opinion, and then out of necessity, because of the podcast, I've got to have one going physical book and one going audio, or else I will not make my deadlines. And so I started listening to fiction books on audio, and I've been pleasantly surprised. Actually, I didn't think I would like it, but I mean, I'm listening to Prayer for Owen Meany right now, and it's a book I read a long time ago, and I forgot how much I loved it. But the narrator is really good, and he does the voices really well, which is important in a book like this. Yeah. So other good ones I listened to, that Bone Setter Woman, that was good. What else? I don't know. I'd have to go. Oh, Beloved was read by Toni Morrison. That was good. Yeah. So there's lots out there. Just
finding them. Yeah.
It's finding your one. There's one that I've got, which is a big one I love, which is tarot based with lots of Cajun speak in it, and the woman who reads it has a perfect accent, and you could just listen to her talk all day. And that just on repeat for me.
A Gambit accent.
Very much
Orleans,
so.
Yeah.
Yes. That's I've got the
See, it's all
Latin
linking back.
Yeah.
bring it around.
Yeah.
Mon chéri. Yeah.
Oh yes, so good. And there's loads of them that do it as well. It's heaven for me.
Have you got any goals, Jess? You're gonna, other than podcast books?
Me, just to try and get some books read. I saw somebody on TikTok who, this might be a goal for you, Ed, who read 402 books last year.
Wow.
And I even had to get the other half to do some maths for me, because I don't do maths, and I'm like, how is that, like 8 a week? That was just so I Wayne's World bow down moment. I was not worthy of her.
I'm politely questioning that, because like there's a booktuber who I think read like 200 or something 20 the other year, and I believe that, because like booktubers will just read like 5 books a week. But to read that many books, you're either reading a genre where the books are like 70,000 words, or you're just not reading them properly. Does that sound an awful thing to say?
It could be a skimmer. But I saw the 402 and I just that's
insane.
That was a turn off TikTok moment, I think.
I guess it can be, like you say, they can be like, if you're reading graphic novels and like, or, you know, things that you can get through, like novellas and stuff like that, or poetry even, you know, short stories, you might be able to fly through quite a lot.
A few.
But yeah.
That's fair, actually. Graphic novels, 'cause I'm a massive graphic novel fan. If you
Mm.
include in that, then that is fair. I'll give them that. 'Cause,
Yeah.
I'm not
and as
a-
we say, audiobooks and stuff too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not a fast reader, so I can't
No,
read
I'm
it.
not.
There's no
Not-
way I'd
not
be able to get near it.
particularly. Mm-mm.
Because I don't absorb it otherwise. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. I find I was talking to my daughter about this the other day, actually, about like when she was getting excited about a book she was reading and she wanted to skip to the end. Now, I was trying not to be too judgmental about that, but I was like, don't spoil it for yourself.
Don't ruin it.
Try and slow down. Like even I have to do that. When you're reading something that's really exciting, you start trying like skimming a bit, don't you, to try and like get like, no, must slow down and actually pay attention to what's happening. Well, you think of the poor writer who spent 4
Spent
years, like we were talking
years.
about earlier, getting that
No.
book out, and you just skim to the end to get there. No, I mean they've obviously done their job well, but like, oh my god.
I think the writer would love that though, if they know you're in a moment where you're just like, I need to know what happens next. I think that's
Yeah.
that would really.
But
they'd
when
love
people
that.
go, oh, you know, I devoured it in the day, and you're like, great, but it took me so
Yeah.
long to write.
Where's the next one?
Yeah,
where's the
exactly.
next one? Oh my god.
Oh.
Well, it's where you sit on like
Mm.
that Venn diagram of readers, because Emma knows I am the chaotic reader. If there's a book I love in a series, I will read like 2 weeks straight and get everyone finished.
I don't think that's
and that's-
chaotic though. I think that's the opposite
oh,
of chaotic. I'm
it's
the one that
not.
will pick up the first book in the series.
You-
Go, that was great. Will I read the rest of the series? No, it's just on my TBR waiting because I know it's going to be good. I'll get to it someday. You
Well, I
know?
get to the chaotic point that I then merge them all together. So I'm kind of like, oh, that's him. No, it's not. It's that one. Is it that one? Oh,
Yeah.
I'll have to reread them. And then I go back to it again on this really weird little loop.
I
I'm a,
read,
sorry,
go on.
gotcha.
I was just going to say, I read ACOTAR straight through.
Yeah, so did
Yeah.
I.
Yeah,
that's
this was it.
Yeah.
I'm a book polygamist in the sense that should probably explain that.
Yes.
So
I know
will-
what you mean.
I would just start reading books and then have about sort of 15 on the go. And
15 is a lot.
sounds-
I was
yeah.
like
That's a lot.
three or
that
four. I do.
sounds chaotic. That's about
But
the
not that many.
maximum
That's
I can.
most chaotic then person.
Yeah, the maximum I can keep the plots in my head without forgetting them is around 15. I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes if I love a book, I'll just spend a whole day just until it's finished. But if
Mhm.
I'm just reading a bunch of books which like I kind of love, but like not my favorite books ever, I'll read 15 in a row. And then the amazing thing about this is why it's great is because you get to a point where you get like 15 endings in a row, and endings are amazing. So I'm
Yes.
like an ending junkie. So I'm like, oh, ending. So you have like 2 days where you're just reading endings, and you're like, oh, amazing.
Wow. So
highly
you don't
recommend
get a
it.
book hangover because you
Yes.
immediately jump into another
Yeah,
ending.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. How am I?
That's
How am I ever going to
smart.
recover from that? And whoa,
Yeah.
Next one.
Yeah,
Like a
'cause, like, you read a
minefield.
really good book and you've been immersed in it for a couple of days, and then
Yeah.
it ends and you're like, oh, what can you read afterwards? It's really hard.
yeah.
Wow. I
I was just
think
saying, on that note,
on that note, yeah.
On that orgy of
Speaking of
endings.
endings,
Yeah. Off you go to read your 15 books.
Yes.
Yeah,
Because we've given you plenty.
mhm.
yeah. Thanks for adding to my TBR. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
No
our
problem.
pleasure.
But yes, thank you for joining us today. It has been
Yes.
fantastic.
Can I be annoying and plug my socials? Is that
course
a
you
terrible
Of
thing
course
to
you
do?
can.
Yeah,
So,
knock yourselves out.
go
I'm
for
sure
it.
Julie will want to do that too. No, it's just because
Mhm.
I'm at that weird stage where I'm like sort of get on TikTok, but like have no one on TikTok, and I'm making all these videos. So if anyone wants stupid videos on TikTok, EL Crocker, that's my stupid pen name. TikTok EL Crocker 3, also stupid pen name, and I don't really care about Instagram. That's just annoying.
Okay.
don't care about Instagram?
Oh,
Some
yeah.
do.
No, EO Crocker on Instagram as well, so I shouldn't say that. Instagram's awesome. And www.eocrocker.com for my blog post where I review books and weird updates about my stuff.
We'll add it all into the
Yeah,
notes.
we'll
yeah,
put
as
the
well,
notes
so
in.
Sorry, I know that's like the
No,
worst thing ever.
I'm
but,
assuming
like-
you'll put them in the notes, so I'm not gonna,
Yeah.
Oh no, that makes me
so.
sound look
No,
awful.
we
Oh
you actually
no.
reminded us. We do that at the end of every podcast anyway, don't we, Jess? And we were completely
Yes, we
going
do.
to finish without doing
Okay.
it.
Yeah, that bit.
You've got to be
Yeah.
that bad if you want to be an author, though. That you have to like get used to just doing this awful stuff where you say, "Oh, this is my socials," and you just
Yeah.
feel, "Oh God, yeah, okay." Yeah, cut that off.
Yeah,
No, we will not. It will be.
No, we're
there.
not. We're leaving it
Yeah.
all to see.
And Julia's stuff's just very coolly going to be in
Yeah,
the show
just
notes. You
slide
can
it
go
into your
find it.
DMs.
Yeah.
Yeah, Julie pretends she doesn't care.
Oh, I care.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
Well,
All right,
thank you
well,
so much for having us.
yes, thank you for coming. And yeah,
Brilliant.
everybody who's listening and or watching at home, we hope you enjoyed it too.